Well, it's not much of a place, but it's home. Meow!
Like fat. It's them blamed hiccups again.
Schlaf, mein Kind, schlaf geseder, singen will ich dir ein Lied, hast du, mein Kind, wirst älter werden, wirst du an Unterschied. Hast du, mein Kind, wirst älter werden, wirst du wissen an Unterschied. Hast du, mein Kind, wirst älter werden, wirst du werden mit Leiden gleich, damals wirst du gefeuert werden, was ist arm und was ist reich, damals wirst du gefeuert werden, was ist arm und was ist reich. Schlaf, mein Kind, schlaf geseder, singen will ich dir ein Lied, hast du, mein Kind, wirst älter werden, wirst du wissen an Unterschied.
The White House, Washington, D.C. To allay anxiety and relieve suspense, the President of the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt, speaks tonight on international affairs to clearly state the position of the country. This morning, the United States was awakened by the voice of Prime Minister Chamberlain of England, declaring that a state of war existed between that country and Germany. So swiftly followed development after development in this history-making day. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
My countrymen and my friends, tonight my single duty is to speak to the whole of America.
Across the morning sky, all the birds are leaving. Ah, how can they know it's time for them to go? Before the winter fire, we'll still be dreaming. I do not count the time. Who knows where the time goes? Who knows where the time goes?
It's like a dream to me now. I've come to look for America. I've come to look for America. I've come to look for America. I've come to look for America.
Of all the boys I've known, and I've known some, until I first met you I was lonesome. And when you came in sight, dear, my heart grew light, and this old world seemed new to me. You're really swell, I have to admit you deserve expressions that really fit you. And so I racked my brain hoping to explain all the things that you do to me. By mere Mr. Shane, please let me explain. By mere Mr. Shane means that you're grand. By mere Mr. Shane, again I'll explain. It means you're the fairest in the land. I could say Bella, Bella, even say Wunderbar. Each language only helps me tell you how grand you are. I've tried to explain by mere Mr. Shane. So kiss me and say you understand. By mere Mr. Shane means that you're grand. It means you're the fairest in the land. I I could say Bella, Bella, even say wunderbar. Each language only helped me tell you how grand you are.
Dear Jeannie and Bobby, this is your younger brother, fearless Freddie. I'm going to read to you a portion of Boston Boy, written by Nat Hentoff. I know you've read it. I think I sent you a copy. I just thought you might fancy listening to some of the stories about Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, Sunday's Candies. Nat wrote about Daddy from pages 45 to 59. And I think that's about as many pages as he dedicated to any character in this book of memoirs. Here we go, starting on page 45. Despite my failure to measure up to the standards of W. Schwartz, I went on to the next year to audition for the premier boys' job in the neighborhood, a position at Sunday's Candies. Not just a summer job, but work all year long, after school, weekends, and practically around the clock in the weeks preceding Christmas. Sunday's Candies was to Fanny Farmer's its nearest rival, as a Mercedes-Benz is to a Ford, as Muddy Waters is to the Rolling Stones, as Thomas Jefferson is to Jack Kennedy. From the chocolate on the outside to the myriad choice of fruits, nuts, and creams, just to begin with, on the inside, a Sunday's Candy was a special event. Accordingly, all Sunday's purchases were specially wrapped with ribbons, specially tied.
If the Queen of England had sent her footman in to buy a pound of the assorted, she would not have been disappointed in any detail. The owner in every way of this chain of 2 candy stores was Samuel Caploe, a graduate of Harvard Business School and a pioneer of systems analysis long before the term had meaning outside our ghetto. By sheer manic intelligence and passionate devotion to detail, Mr. Caploe was more qualified to be in charge of General Motors or General Foods or any of the giants of industry, singly or merged. But through a cruel oversight of history, his managerial genius was focused only on 2 candy stores, with their dreamy women clerks during the day, and at all other hours, a bunch of boys who were essentially unappreciative wise guys.
Many more boys applied for jobs at Sunday's Candies than were hired. Applicants, to begin with, had to be at least 14 years old. But some of us doctored copies of our birth certificates, so eager were we to be among the elect. A successful applicant had instant advanced status in the neighborhood. It was like being admitted to Harvard, where many of the Sunday's boys eventually did go. Getting behind Mr. Caploe's counter was getting on the fast track. As was well known to the lore of Roxbury and adjoining Dorchester, Mr. Caploe picked such smart boys that Sunday's Candies alumni were amply represented among the physicians, professors, lawyers, engineers, and judges of the Bay State. No one had ever heard of a Sunday's boy winding up a failure. Girls were preparing for and going to college even back then, but no female students were ever hired for Sunday's Candies. Women were seen behind the counter, but only during the day, and they were all employed from the general female workforce. High school graduates, most of them married, their studies forever done with. Mr. Caploe never explained why he did not hire from the student body of Girls' Latin School or Radcliffe, but then no one ever asked him. Every boy who applied for a job had 2 long interviews with Mr. Caploe himself. The first began with an examination of the applicant's soul, not in any religious sense. Mr. Caploe wanted to know if this boy was honest in every fiber of his being. He started by immediately making eye contact with the applicant. Woe unto the child who looked down or up or anywhere but into Mr. Caploe's hotly shining eyes. Quote, "You let one shifty child into your operation," I once heard Mr. Caploe tell one of the women who worked days, "and you're a dead man." The soul test, after a series of probes into our integrity since birth, always ended the same way. We knew because on slow nights we would compare notes with the newest clerks, and they affirmed that this part of the entrance exam never changed. Mr. Caploe would begin to set up the papers for the battery of intelligence tests that were coming up next, and the applicant, having screwed himself to the point of almost unbearable virtue, felt able now to relax. Oh, one more thing. Mr. Caploe's eyes were shining again. I want you to think carefully. Take your time before you answer. Now, would you say it is wrong to steal $100? Wrong? Wrong wasn't the word for so despicable a crime. Any boy who stole $100 should be publicly flagged in Franklin Park and made to spend the night with the snakes. Mr. Caploe would nod. Now, would you say that stealing an apple is as wrong as stealing $100? Take your time. Not one boy in the whole history of Sunday's Candy's interviews had ever hesitated one moment to say indignantly that of course stealing an apple is as bad as stealing $100. Because, and it was heartwarming to find out how many of us had used exactly the same words, because any boy who would steal an apple would eventually steal $100. Nodding with enthusiasm, Mr. Caploe then put us through 2 hours of assorted intelligence tests. At the time, I should point out, Sunday's Candy's clerks earned 35 cents an hour, and particularly outstanding clerks who were promoted to boy store managers nights and weekends earned 45 cents an hour. Mr. Caploe was not about to squander such wages on just ordinary minds. Some years later, at college and in applications for other jobs, I had to take other batteries of intelligence tests, but after Mr. Caploe's, they were a breeze. Since Mr. Caploe was not standardized, the tests weren't. Like everything else that had to do with Sunday's Candies, the tests were devised in the astonishing laboratory of Mr. Caploe's mind. The second interview consisted mainly of digital dexterity tests. The customers deserved and expected swift service, with not one piece of chocolate bruised in the handling. There was also the matter of the fiendishly intricate wrapping and tying procedures, which also had to be done in a snap. Some of the applicants did not survive this second interview because, being Jewish boys on the way to college, their fingers were skilled only in turning the pages of books. In panic, those fingers, during the dexterity tests, ran amok among the fudge balls, and the pitiful struggles of these boys to control a box of candy until it could be tied made one wonder if their mothers still tied their shoes for them. I, however, a skilled musician who could handle the clarinet passages in Marsh Slav, while naming in my head every sideman who had ever played with Duke Ellington, had no difficulty with Mr. Caploe's finger-busting exercises. There was only one more Caploe criterion to meet: personal appearance. The clerks must be as sparkling as the candy, as the windows of the display cases, as the very sidewalk in front of the store. And I, to the ceaseless dismay of my father, constantly looked as if I were the apprentice to the herring man on Blue Hill Avenue. But to win this job, I appeared for both interviews, well-scrubbed hair, as carefully parted and smooth as Tyrone Powers, and dressed in a suit, white shirt, and tie. When I came home, my father, close to tears, said, I'll never see you like this again. The letter came. I was now on the fast track. Before being allowed to speak to a customer, however, I was put into training for a week, as had happened with New Sunday's Candy's clerks from time immemorial. My instructor was a night store manager, a student of the history of religion at Harvard Divinity School by day, and a student at all hours of the holy, uncategorizable Mr. Caploe. During that orientation week, I learned how the candy was made, though not the secret formula, and was then guided through 2 huge books which all employees had to master. The first one, which had to be learned by heart, because Mr. Caploe gave the clerks and managers frequent spot quizzes on its contents, was called the Manual. It contained all the rules of the establishment, from the number of pieces of candies each clerk was allowed to eat per shift, 1, to a list of phrases that had to be used when talking to customers. No variations were permitted. Good morning, or afternoon or evening. May I help you? Would you like this gift wrapped? Yes, the weather has been pleasant or unpleasant or changeable. I appreciate your point of view, sir, madam, miss, but I don't know anything about politics. Yes, the design on the top of each piece of chocolate tells what is inside it. Which would you like me to tell you about? The manual also defined the relationship between store clerk and store manager. No fraternization during work hours, although both were boys. The clerk and manager were equal only in the number of sheets of toilet paper they were allowed per shift, 10 each. The second thick volume consisted entirely of inspirational articles from various periodicals and books. Tales of self-made giants of industry who, as boys, had parlayed pluckiness, utter truthfulness, and unquestioned loyalty to their employers, all of this having led to their present richly deserved and enjoyed eminence. The 2 volumes were the only reading matter we were permitted on the job. If all of our appointed tasks had been completed, and if there were no customers in the store, we could take a bit of wholesome pleasure in testing our mastery of the rules in the manual. Or we could dip into the 2nd volume's exciting true adventures, which should make us proud to have this chance at so early an age to follow the path of these grandly self-reliant Americans. Actually, as an admirer of Horatio Alger, I quite liked these stories, much to the scorn of some of my hipster colleagues. If, on the other hand, any of us were caught reading anything but these sacred books on the job, we would be drummed out of the service. Reading that did not directly bear on the improvement of a boy's work was reading that distracted from the boy who, being distracted, could be rude to a customer, who could tell other customers about the rude boys behind the counter. And that is how Sunday's candies would be brought to ruin. We paid as much attention to this rule as we did to the equally insistent regulation that employees who eat no more than 1 piece of candy a night. We were all going to school, and whenever there was no business to take care of, we would take turns hiding in the back of the store with our textbooks or other assigned reading. Reading illicitly, however, was a dangerous risk, for Mr. Caploe was enthusiastically given to making surprise visits to his stores, especially at night and on weekends when the boys worked. Visits isn't quite the word, however. They were raids. He would park his car around the corner, hunch over, and start to run. The first we would know we were in for another lightning inspection was when one of us saw Mr. Caploe's high-crowned pearl gray felt hat skimming along the outside window of the store like the fin of a shark on its way to the door. All those years, it never occurred to Mr. Caploe that he could have achieved total surprise if he'd only left his hat in the car. But then he might have caught cold. With those few seconds' warning, whichever boy was studying in the back, alerted by a desperate cough from the boy in front, had just enough time to toss his books into the garbage bag. There was, alas, a night when I was in the back of the store, and Mr. Caploe, possessed by a hunch, actually put his hand into the garbage bag and with a howl immediately withdrew it, covered with blood. Earlier that evening, I had tossed a broken glass into that garbage bag. Failing to wrap broken glass carefully in heavy paper and put it into a separate container was a violation of the manual, as Mr. Caploe reminded me at great length that night. He did not, however, plunge his hand into the garbage bag again, and my Greek grammar was never exposed, though from that moment on it did have traces of our founder's blood on some of the pages. Along with trying to trap covert readers, Mr. Caploe had an overflowing agenda on these raids, like running his forefinger over the tops of the outside of the display cases in a passionate quest for dust. He also checked to see if any tray of candy was less than brimming, and if a customer came in, he scrunched himself into a corner and, under the conviction that he had become invisible, listened to every word we said to the customer. If we strayed, however slightly, from the lines allotted to us in the manual, we had to explain why in a seminar that Mr. Caploe conducted as soon as the customer left. No explanation was ever satisfactory. As might be expected, the concentration required by these raids was so fierce that nothing could deflect or distract Mr. Caploe from his rounds. A few of my more daring colleagues, however, would occasionally test Mr. Caploe's power of concentration. Staring at the chocolate-covered cherries, for instance, Mr. Caploe would automatically, he prided himself on being a gentleman, ask after our health, before also asking why 2 of the candies were upside down. "How are you, W.A.?" he would say. Mr. Caploe always addressed us only by the first 2 letters of our last names. This neatly precluded even the possibility of any sort of personal relationship between him and any of the boys. When you call someone W.A. all the time, it's hard to remember he's a boy at all. In any case, on some of those raids, W.A., after being asked the state of his health, would cheerily reply, "Fine, Mr. Caploe. They're sure it's cancer, but they think I might have another month or 2. Glad to hear it." Mr. Caploe, staring at the display cases, had now found 2 more chocolate-covered cherries in unseemly positions. "W.A., I want you to come around here and see what you've allowed to happen with the chocolate-covered cherries. If you were a customer and you saw the slovenliness of those candies right here, would you buy anything in this store, or would you speed yourself to the nearest Fanny Farmer's?" W.A. spoke into the void. "I would throw up, Mr. Caploe. And right over here, look at the fudge balls. Bruised. Mr. Caploe kept talking in his customary nasal timbre. He also talked habitually out of the side of his mouth, like a mobster who had taken over a candy chain. Invariably on these delightful visits, Mr. Caploe would take particular care to see how well the clipboard duties had been carried out. Everybody on each shift had a long, narrow board to which a large clip was attached. From the very top all the way down to the bottom of the board were typed instructions, and these had to be followed in exact order from the beginning to the end of the shift. At the top of the clerk's board, for instance, were instructions on how to sweep the sidewalk, including how to hold the broom. Farther down, the clip instructed the clerk to wash his hands and then to wash the outside display cases, the inside display cases, his hands again, inside and out, and so into the evening. On one very special occasion, all of us boys were invited to Mr. Caploe's home. We suspected that he had read in one of the journals of industrial psychology, to which he was addicted, that an employer could increase the efficiency of his workforce if he showed his employees that he, just as they, had a home and family whose welfare, just like theirs, depended on the health of the business which nurtured them all.
Video for Freddie. Freddie, you old son of a candy maker, bless your sweet everything, man, and bless your family, bless your wife, your children, your grandchildren, bless everyone you have in your heart, that they should experience your name, Simcha, every day of their lives, bro. It's a joy to be on the planet in this incarnation with you, and remember one thing, I love you, man. Bye.
You know, we were all out in the backyard, and Paul Brown was there with his shirt sticking up and his tummy sticking out, watching George throw knives at the door. Did I say that George was the oldest of my three brothers? It was Mimi was the oldest, and then George, and then Bob, and then David, and myself. Well, George was always, what do we want to call it? In Latin, they call it sui generis, which means one of a kind. And he always forged his own path. So Herbie Hirschman came by, and Herbie, his destiny in life was to be the biggest pest the world has ever known. So he came by and he jeered and sneered kinds of whatever's nasty remarks at George. George picked up a pitchfork and he aimed it at Herbie. It fell short of Herbie's main trunk, but it managed to pierce his foot to the ground. So Herbie ran around in circles for a few days.
What distance was that?
Oh, I don't remember. Maybe 15 feet. I'm not really sure. George had good aim. And there.
You can hear it when I'm finished, when we're finished with it. But another
Yeah. Ronnie and Gilly playing as brothers should. Ronnie just whacked Gilly with a spatula. Anyhow, so what happened next? My brothers and a friend of theirs decided that they would presage the U.S. space program by quite a few years, but kind of in the opposite direction. And what that means is that during the winter, they would pile up big drifts of snow just outside the first floor of the three-decker on the ground. And we lived on the third floor, so we went up there, jumped from the third floor onto the pile of snow. On the second floor lived Bessie and Phil Goldberg. You couldn't ever see Phil if he was on the other side of Bessie from you, because Phil weighed about 12 pounds and Bessie weighed about 312 pounds. So it was their custom to sit at the kitchen table. The kitchen windows looked out onto the back porch. And
which faced down onto the snow.
Yeah, right. And our porch was on top of Phil and Bessie's, and so they're sitting facing each other at the windows, right? And so they had, their peripheral vision was out to the porch. And they're sitting having a glass tea. The custom was you had tea in a glass, and you take a sugar cube and put it between your teeth and then suck the tea in so the sugar cube would stay for a while, and then the cube would sweeten the tea as it came through. So Bessie's sitting there and Phil's sitting there, and in their peripheral vision, something disturbed them. They weren't quite sure what it was. And Bessie says to Phil, did you see something going by from top to bottom? At that point, another object appeared in their peripheral vision. So they decided to go out on the back porch and investigate. And as they looked up, they saw a pair of heels racing at a rapid rate toward them, and they brought their heads in, and there went George flying by from top to bottom. So
Wait until the other person got out of the way.
well, yes, but not by much. George was not vicious, but he was always trying to improve his aim, let's say. And if there happened to be somebody else in the way, woe be unto that other person.
Now, wouldn't than me.
You should have auditioned for the Aristocrats. Anyhow, so I would walk to school and to the kindergarten, and one day I remember I got to school in the kindergarten, and I raised my hand to the teacher and said, "Teacher, I gotta go to the bathroom." She wouldn't let me go. And I raised my hand again. "Teacher, I gotta go to the bathroom." She wouldn't let me go, so I shit my pants.
So did Joey. Was this like in first period or?
I did. I don't remember getting any new clothes. I probably did, but I don't remember.
Did you play any sports with your brothers or your friends?
Oh, Buck. Oh, yeah. Well, no, Buck Up. Well, okay. So it's this game called Buck Up where, like you can have 3, 4, 5 kids play or whatever. Often there were just 2. We're going to have a game, and they're trying to figure out, well, who's going to be the captain or who's going to be on this side or the other side. So they play Buck Up for it, and it involved the kids would throw out only 2 fingers, either the first 2 fingers, and you throw out either 1 finger or 2 fingers or no fingers. And then one of the kids would call odds or evens. See, before you put your fingers out, 1, 2, would you say odds or evens, territory or geography, and angle of the knife in the ground from one of the sides of the rectangle to another, and the larger piece was your territory or your geography. Then the next guy came along, and he threw the knife into your territory, and he tried to slice off as much as he could from your territory. There were different ways of throwing the knives. Like you could grab by the blade and throw it, and it would go end over end into the ground, you hoped. And if it didn't, you lost your turn. And then, or you could put it on the back of your hand. Put your palm facing the ground, and you put the knife on the back of your hand, top of your fingers, with either the knife pointing out in the same direction as your fingers or in. There were a couple of variations. One, you took your hand and you raise it slightly up the ends of the fingers so that the knife, you know what I'm talking about? I don't know if anybody's still listening to this. So yeah, and then you just quickly flicked your hand down, and the knife would either flick over and land in the ground, you hoped, or not. And so, and then there were a couple other variations. So that was territory or geography. And mothers were always looking for fingers that they were sure would. They told us time after time, you got to cut your finger off, and I'm not going to put it back on. Or I may stick it in your ear. So, yeah, so that was geography. And then there was, let's see. Sports. What other sports? Oh, you went down to Franklin Field in the wintertime and ice skated, and they used to flood all of Franklin Field. Big place. Just was put covering of water over it, and it would freeze. And they had lights on part of the field. So it was baseball and whatever, football. There was a field house down there, Franklin Field House. And you could go inside there and you put your skates on there, and you always skated with your shoes. You tied your shoelaces together, put them around your arm or around your neck, that you didn't get garroted. And then you'd skate. So, it was a lot of fun because it was very fascinating lighting conditions at night. You had the lights, and it was wintertime and dark, and
the wind was blowing or snow.
Sometimes it was snowing, sometimes the wind was blowing. There were always a lot of kids out there, and usually a fight or two, and a get-up hockey game here and there. And one night, I was out there, and I fell through the ice. Which wasn't bad because it wasn't that deep, but it was that wet and cold. So I can't remember if George or Bob were with me and they were supposed to be watching me, but in any event, I got out of the ice. I got out of the water and trudged on home in my skates. And I thought skating on ice was hard. So I got home, and that was a very royal reaction.
Did you ever go to a professional hockey game with your dad?
Oh, no, not with... Well, yes, once with Sam. Sam was... Let's put it this way. Athletics and Sam never quite fit together. Example, this was later on in the years. George and Bob, and I guess I to a lesser extent, persuaded him to come out on the tennis court with us and hit the ball. Well, slight background digression. Sam always wore a shirt and a tie and a suit. And he never took off the tie during the day, except in the middle of summertime. Sometimes he would take off the tie, and if he was really adventurous, he would actually roll up his sleeves very neatly on each of his arms, but never more than 2 turns. So I think this time we were out on the tennis court, and George, who was not too patient and not too tolerant. Fortunately, he had a tennis racket instead of a pitchfork. But so he hit the ball, and my father would stand in the middle of the backcourt, and George would always hit the ball away from him. You know, he wanted to win. So my father would never retrieve the ball, and George would get increasingly, exponentially infuriated with my dad. He'd say, run after the ball. You got to hit the ball. You got to go for it. And my father would, in a very dispassionate voice, would say, well, if you don't hit the ball to me, I can't hit it back to you. Which was his version of tennis. Okay, sports. And, and a hockey game, yeah. One time I think it was George and I, maybe my Uncle Jaime, and my dad, the dentist, yeah. More of whom later. Great man. He did us all a great favor early in life. So we go to the hockey game, and Uncle Hyde got rink-side seats, Boston Bruins and, who knows, Montreal Canadiens and stuff. Now, hockey games in Boston, I don't know about other places, but they could get pretty rowdy. Sam was not a rowdy type. Sam was, I'd say, more on the run and hide type. Roughness was not in his bag of tricks. So we were sitting in the first row, rink side, and my dad was sitting there with his arms folded, and he always, like I say, wore a suit and a white shirt and a tie, and he had a winter coat on because it was wintertime, and a hat. I mean, a gray felt hat, fedora. So he's you've been to hockey games, you know the body checks. Often the hockey players fly over the top of the boards. And a few times they body checked right in front of us, and they'd get into a little fight, and then they'd move off. But one time, that was okay. But one time, the puck comes sailing. His puck comes whistling over the puck at light speed, and it whacks the back of the chair right beside Grandpa. He's sitting there catatonic. So yeah, he went there with us that time.
The puck never hit him.
No, unfortunately. Kum b'choratzeil v'tzeli avodah. Kum b'choratzeil v'tzeli avodah. Kum v'tzeli avodah. And so on. And I never knew what it meant, but yeah, I did get sent to Hebrew school at the Mishkan Tefillah Shul in Roxbury.
Say the name again.
Mishkan Tefillah, Mishkan and Tefila. The rabbi was Rabinovitz. Rabinovitz. Let's put it this way. You've heard of Crohn's disease. People who suffer from Crohn's disease often have terrible grimaces on their face. Rabinovitz always looked at me like he had the most severe case of Crohn's disease. The guy never smiled. And when the cantor, Glickman, he had a nice voice, and he was all decked out in white and gold trim and everything. So they had this routine. It was kind of like a vaudeville routine because the cantor was up at the bima, the podium, singing. And as he got near the end, he would start drifting backward ever so slowly, and Rabinovitz would start going forward at roughly the same rate of speed, so that when Glickman sang his last note, Rabinovitz was up there, and the first holy words out of his mouth, "Lock the doors," so nobody could get out and go to the bathroom. They'd been there for 14 hours, you know. So...
This was not shul. This was at the...
No, this was a shul.
Oh, the shul.
Yeah, the Hebrew school was in a building by the shul.
Oh.
Well, I guess I was always a pest and a troublemaker. I loved to fool around. I just had a good time fooling around. You know, I couldn't see any reason not to have fun. And so I didn't take Hebrew school too seriously. And a teacher, Miss Ruth Venn, very nice, had been a student of Grandma Caploe, my mother, because she had taught Hebrew when she was in high school and college. She was very, very, very bright and accomplished, despite the best efforts of her sons to the contrary. And Miss Ruthven, you know, she couldn't understand my mischievous, puckish behavior, so I got pulled out of Hebrew school. And then I went, and I had to have bar mitzvah lessons, right? So so my folks got me lessons with Rabbi Spack. Rabbi Spack. He's a nice guy. He was always smiling. I don't know, it seemed he was in a parallel universe. But every 3 words, you know, he had to suck in the drool at the sides of his mouth. So he would go. Now, Simcha, that was my name in Hebrew. Now, Simcha, I want you to repeat after me the following. So, you know, I repeated after him, whatever it was. He said, no, that's not part of the prayer. Well, you told me. So, Monday mornings with Malachi. It's February 26th. I'm not walking in Cerrito Vista Park. I'm sitting here in a very, very quiet atmosphere, as you can hear. I have a way of shutting out surrounding voices. And every Monday morning I go to a writing group of about 20 people, and that's where I am now. The leader of the group is Beth Glick Riemann. She's 90 years old, and there are several other 90-year-olds in this group.
You're not a dream, you're not an angel, you're a man. I'm not a queen, I'm a woman, take my hand. We'll make a space in the lives that we have planned, and here we'll stay until it's time for you to go. Yes, we're different, worlds apart, we're not the same. We laughed and played at the start like any game. You could have stayed outside my heart, but then you came, and you will stay until it's time for you to go. Don't ask why, don't ask how, don't ask forever. Love me now. This love of mine had no beginning, it has no end. I was an oak, now I'm a willow, now I can bend. And though I'll never in my life see you again, it will stay until it's time for you to go. Don't ask why of me, don't ask how of me, don't ask forever of me. Love me, love me, no. You're not a dream, you're not an angel, you're a man. I'm not a queen, I'm a woman, take my hand. We'll make a space in the lives that we have planned, and here we'll stay until it's time for you to go.
Before we said all goodbye, the night before love was in your eyes, the night before. Now today I'm fine. You will change your mind, treat me like you did the night before. Don't know, last night is the night I will remember you bad. When I think of things you did, makes me wanna cry. Have you been telling lies the night before? Love was unwise the night before. Now today I'm fine. You will change your mind, treat me like you did the night before. Hey, hey, we're the monkeys, funniest people alive, yeah. Won't believe my scene, yeah. People alive. We wanna be friendly. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do.
Sing it.
Sure.
Sing the monkeys, Amy.
Cheering and wagging down my clock and hit it again.
No, do it the right way. Come on.
He said crackle for
See two little monkeys.
Get down, brother.
Love is but a song we sing, feels the way we die. You can make the mountains ring, or make the angels cry. Though the bird is on the wing, and you may not know why. Come on, people now, smile on your brother, everybody get together, try to love one another right now. Some may come and some may go, he will surely pay his. When the one that left us here returns for us at last, we are but a moment's sunlight fading in the grass. Come on, people now, smile on your brother, everybody get together, try to love one another right now. Come on, people now, smile on your brother, everybody get together, try to love one another right now. Come on, people now, smile on your brother. Everybody get together, try to love one another right now.
Spanish is the loving tongue, bright as music, soft as spray. 'Twas a man I learned it from, living down Sonora way. I don't look much like a lover, but I say his love words over often when I'm all alone. Mi amor, mi corazón. Nights when he knew where I'd ride, he would listen for my spurs, throw those big doors open wide, lift me from the saddle in his arms. How the hours would go flying, and too soon we would be sighing, while the moonlight brightly shone. Mi amor, mi corazón. Starlight on the patio, old Senora nodding near. Me and Juan, we're talking low, so the madre does not hear. How the hours would go flying, and too soon we would be sighing, while the moonlight brightly shone. Mi amor, mi corazón. I haven't seen him since that night. I can't cross the line, you know, and he's wanted for a gambling fight. Like as not, it's better so. Still, I often kind of miss him, since that last sad night I kissed him, left his heart and lost my own.
Una le voy a matar, una le voy a matar. La otra para criar porque me la dio mi suegra. Se anidan entre las piedras, duermen arriba el ciruelo, duermen arriba el ciruelo. Las tres se ponen en vuelo, todavía no se entra el sol, más lindo que el arrebol. Cuando se elevan del suelo, cuando se elevan del suelo.
If you black and got a wet for living now, this is what they will say to you. They say, if you's white, she's all right. If you's brown, stick around. But if you's black, brother, get back, get back, get back. I was in a place one night, they was all having fun. They was all buying beer and wine, but they would not sell me none. They said, if you was white, you'd be all right. If you was brown, you could stick around. But as you black, brother, get back, get back, get back. I went to an employment office. I got a number and I got in line. They called everybody's number, but they never did call mine. They said, if you was white, she'd be all right. If you was brown, you could stick around. But as you black, brother, get back, get back, get back. Me and a man was working side by side. This is what it meant. They was paying him $1 an hour, and they was paying me 50 cents. They said, if he was white, she'd be all right. If he was brown.
Particle man, doing the things a particle can. What's he like? It's not important. Particle man. Is he a dot or is he a speck? When he's underwater, does he get wet? Or does the water get him instead? Nobody knows. Particle man.